I knew this was coming. Peter Orszag. You may recall he was the head of OMB until he left to make money. He has an op-ed today in the Financial Times, and among other things he says, it's difficult to see how the medium-term federal deficit can be reduced to sustainable levels without additional tax revenues from those earning less than $250,000 a year. Ooh. Look at that, would you? Now, first of all, implicit in that sentence, I say I'm an expert at unraveling liberal speak. Implicit in that sentence is, he says here, unsustainable levels. So he believes that the debt is at an unsustainable level. And he was Obama's bagman. And I mean that in the legal sense. Bagman, while Obama was doing all this financial damage. Moreover, he says, look, we got to go after the money people who earn less than $250 a year. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the quintessential middle class that he wants to go after. As they must. They can't fund this government, this massive spending. They can't fund these deficits on the backs of billionaires and millionaires. No, they have to go after you. So let me make a statement which will be profound, if I may. I say in all humility. So if you hear it tomorrow, you'll know who started the ball. What's going on here? What's going on here is plunder. Now that they've created this maze of massive government monstrosities and monuments to themselves, so that they can control your health care and the air that you exhale and anything else they want to, wake up in the morning and decide they want to run. Now somebody has to pay for it. You. All this spread the wealth stuff, let's get the rich stuff, well, ladies and gentlemen, it was never going to work. It never can work. It never has worked. Those of you who voted for Obama, you were useful idiots. Those of you who have voted for members of Congress who supported Obama, well, you're useful idiots too. I read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, did you? I read it when I was a very young man, when there were boxes and boxes of them over there at the Vista agency under the Reagan administration, and we had to defund them. If you haven't read it, you should at least be aware of it. Because Saul Alinsky said, your real target, it's not the rich or the super rich, it's the middle class, as we like to call it. You need to pretend that you're part of the middle class in order to destroy the middle class. Look at the unemployment number. The real unemployment figure is closer to 20%. Look at the housing market. What's going on there? Inflation is, in fact, starting to kick in if you look at fuel prices and food prices. You know what's keeping the inflation price down? The crashing housing market. The people who are losing their homes, who are underwater, who are going to lose their homes, you're still having to pay more for fuel and more for food. And what is this president and what is this administration doing on that front? Strangling us. Oh, may I say that? Yes, I will. Strangling us. Deep water rigs. They can't drill. Can't drill in Alaska. Can't drill in the Great Lakes. Can't drill off of Florida. Can't drill off of California. We can't drill in the oceans. We can't drill in the wilderness, Mark. Well, gee, what's left? Where do we find massive amounts of oil? At the 7-Eleven? You kind of have to go where it is, and it happens to be in wilderness areas. Now, the fact that we're not going after it doesn't stop our friends from going after it all over the world, whether it's the North Pole or North Africa, whether it's the Middle East or right in our hemisphere. Our dear friends, the Communist Chinese, They're on the move. They're locking up contracts all over the world. What are we doing? We're manufacturing propeller hats, battery-operated heating socks, all sorts of stupid stuff that we think is going to fuel our economy. And guess what? It won't. You're going to see the price of gasoline go to $4 and eventually $5, not in the too distant future. That is part of an intentional plan by this administration, which is bought off by the flat earth, no-growth Marxist environmental movement. All you blue-collar workers, union or non-union, doesn't matter to me, you're all going to be affected by it. Look what they just did to West Virginia. Look what they're going to do to western Pennsylvania and parts of Ohio and Kentucky and other places where we have a significant coal industry. Many of you are going to lose your jobs. Your union's going to continue to fund Democrat candidates who are supporting policies in Washington that empower the EPA to take your livelihood away from you. When are you going to wake up to it? Look around you. Who is it exactly who's in bed with Wall Street? Who's in bed with Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan? Who was at the party? That's right, the State of the Union dinner with Obama and the head red over there in China. Those guys. Well, what were they doing there? Well, what do you think they're doing there? We have a combination of crony capitalism going on here and crony government, which I write about in Liberty and Tyranny. Don't buy all this populist bullcrap coming out of this White House. He's for the little guy. May I ask you a question? What little guy is he for? What has he done for the so-called little guy? What has he done for the so-called middle class? Can somebody tell me one thing? Just one! Tell me one thing he's done. He rewards all of his political buddies. He rewards the union bosses. How about the union members? And apart from the unions, which represent 11% of this country, and unfortunately the biggest percentage of that is in government, how about the rest of the people in this country? What has he done for you? He's bankrupting your children. Has the housing market turned around with his grand policies? No. Has the job market turned around? All these trillions and trillions of dollars spent. What have they done? Then when you want to get the budget under control, reverse course, unleash, liberate the private sector, which is the only way you create wealth. You create opportunity and create jobs. What do they say? Oh, they're going to cut Social Security. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no Social Security. They already stole it all. It's in the negative, meaning the IOUs are in the negative. Social Security is being funded by the General Operating Fund because all those decades where you contributed into this fund, they stole the money. And then they have the gall to come back and say, if you dare cut our budget, which goes for all this other crap. Well, what's going to happen to Social Security? It reminds me of Prop 13 in California. Excuse me. There won't be any cops. There won't be any firefighters. There won't be any schools. Really? Well, there are cops, firefighters, and schools. What's going to get rid of cops, firefighters, and schools are the liberal nut jobs who can't control themselves when they get a hold of the government. So everybody knows this is unsustainable. And so I want to ask the question again. Mr. Call Screener, let us do something very radical. Normally we leave one line open for the irregular Americans, that is the libs. Let's leave two lines open. So my question to you Obama supporters, drones, irregular Americans, you know who you are, is simple. What is your proposal now that the Republicans have put theirs out for cutting spending? Oh, by the way, you may mention the military, but the military is not the biggest part of the budget. It's much smaller than domestic spending. Domestic spending is like 4 times more than military spending. But let's say we cut the military, which I would oppose, because, there are little constitutional things where only the federal government can do it and the states can't, like defend us. But even if we were to cut defense by 10 or 20%, that's not enough. So where do you liberals want to cut in domestic spending? It's your turn. Your turn. There's a proposal by the other side on the table. What's your proposal? Or do you want to just massively increase taxes on people who earn under $250,000? Is that the new game plan? According to Peter Orszag, it has to be. Because there's no other way to get the money. Oh, I knew they'd hook you in eventually, ladies and gentlemen. All of us. We have to sacrifice. Does Obama look like he's sacrificing, by the way? Flying here and there, deciding whether he's going to go to the Super Bowl. I hear people say, I don't begrudge it. Well, I do begrudge it. When you have an economy like ours, when you have 10% unemployment, systemic 10% unemployment, which is really 20% unemployment, no, you shouldn't be flying off to the Super Bowl. No, you shouldn't be spending 11 days in Hawaii. How about a little more time at the desk? Read some books on economics by people who actually understand it. Not these left-wing ideologues.